Marcus Chen had dedicated 23 years of his life to perfecting the ancient art of karate. His hands, hardened by countless hours striking wooden boards and concrete blocks, had earned him 17 championship titles across 3 continents. The walls of his dojo displayed golden trophies and newspaper clippings that told the story of his rise from a scrappy teenager in San Francisco's Chinatown to becoming one of the most feared competitors in international martial arts circuits. On this particular autumn morning, Marcus was walking through the historic district of Edinburgh, Scotland, where he had traveled to attend a prestigious martial arts conference. The cobblestone streets echoed with the clip-clop of horse hooves as the famous Royal Guard conducted their ceremonial patrol through the ancient city. Marcus had always been fascinated by traditions and ceremonies, viewing them with the same respect he held for the rituals of his martial arts practice. The morning sun cast long shadows between the medieval buildings as Marcus made his way to a small cafe, where he planned to meet with other martial artists from around the world. His confident stride and alert posture betrayed years of disciplined training, even in casual moments like this. Passers-by often noticed something different about Marcus: the way he moved with calculated precision, how his eyes constantly scanned his surroundings, and the quiet intensity that seemed to radiate from his compact but powerful frame. As he turned the corner onto the Royal Mile, Marcus encountered a scene that would change his perspective forever. A magnificent black stallion, adorned with the ceremonial regalia of the Royal Guard, stood majestically in the morning light. Its rider, a tall figure in traditional uniform, sat with perfect posture that spoke of years of military discipline and training. The horse's coat gleamed like polished obsidian, and its eyes held an intelligence that immediately caught Marcus's attention. Something about the animal's presence stirred a memory from Marcus's childhood. His grandfather had once told him stories about the legendary horses of ancient Chinese warriors, describing how these creatures possessed not just physical strength, but an almost supernatural awareness of their surroundings. Looking at this royal mount, Marcus felt a strange urge to test something he had only heard about in old tales: the idea that truly exceptional animals could sense and respond to the fighting spirit of a trained warrior. The street was relatively quiet, with only a few tourists snapping photographs from a respectful distance. Marcus approached slowly, his martial artist's curiosity overriding his usual caution. He had broken boards with his bare hands in front of thousands of spectators, had faced opponents who outweighed him by 50 pounds, and had never backed down from a challenge in the ring. Yet something about this moment felt different, charged with an energy he couldn't quite identify. The Royal Guard noticed Marcus's approach but remained silent, his trained eyes assessing this confident stranger, who moved with the unmistakable gait of a fighter. The Guard had encountered many types of people during his years of service: tourists, dignitaries, protesters, and curious locals. But there was something unique about this man's presence that commanded attention even from a distance. Marcus stopped about 10 feet away from the horse and rider, close enough to observe the intricate details of the ceremonial tack and the powerful musculature of the animal. The horse turned its head slightly, fixing Marcus with an intelligent gaze that seemed to look right through him. In that moment, Marcus felt compelled to demonstrate the power he had spent decades cultivating, not out of arrogance or showmanship, but from a genuine curiosity about how this magnificent creature might respond to a display of martial arts prowess. Without considering the potential consequences of his actions, Marcus settled into a fighting stance that had become as natural to him as breathing. His feet found their perfect position on the cobblestones, his center of gravity lowered, and his breathing shifted into the rhythmic pattern that preceded his most powerful techniques. The few tourists nearby stopped their conversations, sensing that something unusual was about to happen. The Royal Guard's horse seemed to sense the change in Marcus's energy immediately. Its ears pricked forward, and its muscles tensed slightly, as if recognizing the fighting intent that was building in the man standing before them. This was no ordinary tourist seeking a photograph or a casual encounter with ceremonial guards. This was a warrior preparing to demonstrate his skills, though his target and intentions remained unclear to everyone present, including Marcus himself. The tension in the air became palpable as Marcus drew upon years of training and muscle memory. He had performed his signature technique thousands of times, a devastating palm strike that could shatter 3 inches of solid pine boards. In competition, this move had earned him countless victories and had become his trademark finishing technique. Now, standing on the ancient cobblestones of Edinburgh, he felt compelled to demonstrate this power, though he couldn't fully explain why. Marcus focused his energy, drawing from the deep breathing techniques he had mastered through decades of meditation and physical conditioning. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory, teaching him about the flow of qi and the importance of channeling internal energy through precise physical movements. The palm strike he was preparing required perfect coordination between mind, body, and spirit, a unity that had taken him years to achieve. The Royal Guard's horse seemed to sense the building energy like an approaching storm. Its nostrils flared slightly, and it shifted its weight in a way that suggested heightened awareness rather than fear. This was a creature bred and trained for ceremony and discipline, accustomed to crowds, loud noises, and unexpected situations. Yet something about Marcus's presence was triggering responses that went beyond its normal training. With a sharp exhale that had become his battle cry in countless competitions, Marcus unleashed his palm strike toward the air near the horse's flank. He had no intention of making contact with the animal. His control was too precise for such recklessness. Instead, he aimed to demonstrate the speed and power of his technique in a way that would showcase his abilities without causing harm. The strike cut through the morning air with a distinctive whooshing sound that spoke of incredible force and velocity. What happened next shocked everyone present, including Marcus himself. The horse, rather than startling or shying away from the sudden movement and sound, responded with lightning reflexes that defied explanation. In one fluid motion, the magnificent stallion shifted its weight and delivered a precise kick that caught Marcus completely off guard. The horse's hoof connected with Marcus's shoulder with surgical precision, not with the crushing force that could have shattered bones, but with exactly enough power to send the karate champion stumbling backward. Marcus found himself sitting unceremoniously on the cold cobblestones, his carefully cultivated dignity scattered like autumn leaves in the wind. The tourists gasped and reached for their phones, but the Royal Guard remained perfectly composed as if such incidents were routine occurrences in his line of duty. The horse, meanwhile, settled back into its ceremonial stance with an air of calm satisfaction, as if it had just completed a perfectly executed training exercise. The impact had not injured Marcus physically. His conditioning and reflexes had helped him absorb most of the force, but his pride had taken a devastating blow. Here was a man who had spent his entire adult life perfecting the art of combat, who had faced opponents from around the world and emerged victorious, time and again. Yet he had just been outmaneuvered by a horse with such ease and precision that it seemed almost choreographed. As Marcus slowly picked himself up from the cobblestones, brushing dust from his jacket, he noticed something that made his embarrassment even more acute. The Royal Guard was looking down at him with an expression that wasn't quite amusement but certainly wasn't concern either. It was the look of someone who had witnessed something entirely predictable, as if Marcus's humbling had been as inevitable as sunrise. The horse turned its head to regard Marcus with what could only be described as mild interest, the same way a chess master might glance at a novice who had just made an obviously poor move. There was no malice in the animal's gaze, no aggression or triumph, just a calm acknowledgement of what had transpired. The stallion's breathing remained steady and controlled, showing no signs of the adrenaline or excitement that Marcus was experiencing. Several tourists approached cautiously, offering to help Marcus to his feet and asking if he needed medical attention. Their concern was genuine, but their barely concealed amusement at seeing such an obviously skilled fighter brought low by a ceremonial horse added another layer to Marcus's mortification. He assured them he was fine while internally grappling with what had just occurred. The Royal Guard finally spoke, his voice carrying the crisp authority of military training. "Sir, I trust you're unharmed. Bucephalus here has quite excellent reflexes." The guard's tone was perfectly professional, but Marcus detected something else beneath the formality, a hint that this interaction was far from over, and that perhaps his education had only just begun. The Royal Guard dismounted with fluid grace that reminded Marcus of his own martial arts movements, precise, controlled, and executed with years of practiced expertise. As the guard's boots touched the cobblestones, Marcus got his first clear look at the man who commanded such an extraordinary horse. Captain William Ashworth stood well over 6 feet tall, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority and responsibility. His uniform was immaculate, but it was his eyes that caught Marcus's attention. Sharp, intelligent, and holding depths that suggested experiences far beyond ceremonial duties. Bucephalus has been with the Royal Guard for 8 years, Captain, Ashworth explained, running a gloved hand along the horse's neck with obvious affection. He's descended from a line of war horses that served in actual cavalry units, not merely ceremonial roles. His training includes responses to threats and aggressive movements, something your demonstration clearly triggered. The captain's tone remained professional, but Marcus sensed he was being studied and evaluated in ways he didn't yet understand. Marcus felt compelled to explain himself, though the words came out more defensively than he intended. I'm Marcus Chen, 17-time international karate champion. I wasn't trying to threaten anyone, I was just demonstrating a technique I've perfected over 23 years of training. Even as he spoke, Marcus realized how foolish his actions must have appeared to an outside observer. What had seemed like a reasonable display of skill now felt like the impulsive behavior of someone seeking attention. Captain Ashworth nodded, thoughtfully, his expression giving nothing away. I'm familiar with your reputation, Mr. Chen. Your victories in the World Martial Arts Championships have been quite impressive. The fact that the guard recognized him caught Marcus off guard. He hadn't expected his achievements to be known outside martial arts circles, certainly not by British military personnel. However, I suspect Bucephalus here might offer you a different perspective on combat effectiveness. The morning crowd was beginning to thicken as more tourists discovered the unusual scene unfolding on the Royal Mile. Marcus noticed several people taking photographs and videos, and he realized that his humiliation was being documented for posterity. Social media would likely immortalize the moment when a celebrated martial artist was effortlessly handled by a ceremonial horse. The thought made him want to leave immediately, but something about Captain Ashworth's demeanor suggested their encounter was far from finished. Your technique was flawless from a competitive standpoint, the captain continued, his analytical tone suggesting genuine expertise in combat assessment. Perfect form, excellent power generation, precise targeting. In a tournament setting, that strike would have earned you points and probably intimidated your opponent. Marcus felt a small surge of vindication, but the captain's next words brought him back to reality. However, Bucephalus operates under different principles entirely. The horse in question had returned to its ceremonial stance, but continued to observe Marcus with those intelligent eyes. There was something almost human in the animal's gaze, an awareness that went beyond simple training or conditioning. Marcus had faced human opponents who seemed less perceptive than this extraordinary stallion. The realization was both humbling and fascinating, challenging everything he thought he knew about combat awareness and reflexive response. Captain Ashworth seemed to read Marcus's thoughts. Traditional martial arts focus on perfecting techniques against human opponents, following human patterns of movement and reaction. Bucephalus represents something different, pure instinct combined with military training, unencumbered by the psychological games and tactical considerations that humans bring to combat. The explanation made sense, but it also opened up questions that Marcus had never considered. I've spent my entire adult life studying combat, Marcus admitted, his earlier defensiveness giving way to genuine curiosity. I've faced opponents from dozens of different fighting styles, adapted to their techniques, learned to anticipate their moves, but I've never encountered anything like what just happened. The admission cost him something. Martial artists of his caliber rarely acknowledged being outmatched, especially not in front of strangers and tourists with cameras. The captain's expression softened slightly, perhaps recognizing the courage it took for someone of Marcus's stature to acknowledge. A learning moment. Bucephalus doesn't think about techniques or strategies. He simply responds to energy, intention, and threat assessment with perfect efficiency. There's no ego involved, no concern for reputation or style, just pure, instinctive reaction, refined through excellent training. The description sounded like something Marcus's grandfather might have said about the highest levels of martial arts mastery. A group of school children approached with their teacher, eager to see the famous royal guard horse up close. Captain Ashworth acknowledged them with a professional nod but continued his conversation with Marcus. If you're genuinely interested in understanding what happened here, rather than simply nursing wounded pride, I believe Bucephalus might have more to teach you. The invitation was subtle but unmistakable, and Marcus found himself intrigued despite his embarrassment. Captain Ashworth's invitation led to an unexpected afternoon that would fundamentally change Marcus's understanding of combat and awareness. After completing his ceremonial duties, the captain guided Marcus to the Royal Guard's training facilities, on the outskirts of Edinburgh, a sprawling complex where tradition met cutting-edge military preparation. The facilities included everything from historical weapon training grounds to modern tactical simulation chambers, but it was the equestrian section that captured Marcus's immediate attention. Bucephalus was not alone. The Royal Guard maintained a stable of 12 extraordinary horses, each trained not just for ceremony but for practical military applications that most people never witnessed. As Captain Ashworth explained while leading Marcus through the facilities, these animals represented generations of careful breeding and intensive training designed to create the perfect partnership between human and horse in high-stress situations. Watch carefully, Captain Ashworth instructed as he worked with Bucephalus in a large training arena. I'm going to demonstrate something that might help you understand what happened this morning. The captain positioned himself near Bucephalus and began a series of movements that looked choreographed but felt entirely natural. Every shift in the captain's posture, every change in his breathing pattern, every subtle alteration in his energy seemed to trigger corresponding responses from the horse. Marcus observed, with the focused attention he usually reserved for studying opponents before major competitions. What he witnessed challenged every assumption he had made about the relationship between training, instinct, and combat effectiveness. Bucephalus responded to threats that existed only in Captain Ashworth's imagination, reacting to aggressive intentions that were never fully expressed through physical action. The horse seemed to read the captain's mind, anticipating commands before they were given and responding to dangers that existed only as possibilities. This is what you encountered this morning, Captain Ashworth explained as Bucephalus settled into a relaxed stance. Your technique was perfect, but your intention was broadcast clearly enough for Bucephalus to assess and respond to the threat you represented. In his evaluation, you needed to be neutralized efficiently and without permanent harm, which is exactly what he accomplished. The explanation was matter-of-fact, but Marcus felt the weight of its implications. Captain Ashworth then invited Marcus to work directly with Bucephalus, starting with simple exercises designed to help the martial artist understand how his energy and intentions were being perceived. The first attempts were disastrous. Every time Marcus assumed a fighting stance or began to channel his internal energy in preparation for a technique, Bucephalus would respond with subtle but clear defensive measures, shifting weight, adjusting position, or simply fixing Marcus with a gaze that conveyed readiness for whatever might come next. You're thinking like a competitor, Captain Ashworth observed after Marcus's fourth unsuccessful attempt to approach Bucephalus without triggering defensive responses. Every movement you make is calculated for maximum impact and efficiency against a human opponent. But Bucephalus isn't evaluating your technique. He's reading your spirit, your intentions, the energy you're projecting into the space around you. The guidance was unlike anything Marcus had received in 2 decades of martial arts instruction. Gradually, Marcus began to understand the lesson being offered. His grandfather had spoken of martial arts masters who could sense fighting intent from across a room, who could neutralize opponents without striking a single blow simply by projecting the right kind of presence. Marcus had always assumed these were exaggerated stories from a more mystical era of martial arts. But working with Bucephalus was demonstrating that such awareness was not only possible, but practical. The breakthrough came when Marcus stopped trying to impress and started trying to understand. Instead of approaching Bucephalus as a challenger or demonstrator, he began moving with the same mindful presence he used during meditation. His breathing became natural rather than controlled, his posture relaxed rather than ready for combat. and his energy focused inward rather than projected outward as a display of power. Bucephalus' quote's response was immediate and remarkable. The horse's defensive alertness melted away, replaced by the kind of calm attention that suggested acceptance rather than mere tolerance. For the first time since their morning encounter, Marcus felt like he was being evaluated as something other than a potential threat. The sensation was both humbling and enlightening, offering him a glimpse into forms of awareness that his competitive training had never addressed. "Now you're beginning to understand," Captain Ashworth commented as Marcus successfully approached Bucephalus and placed a gentle hand on the horse's neck. Combat effectiveness isn't just about perfecting techniques or developing physical power. It's about understanding energy, reading intentions, and responding appropriately to what's actually happening rather than what you expect to happen. The lesson was simple in concept but revolutionary in its implications for everything Marcus thought he knew about martial arts. The lessons with Bucephalus continued for 3 intensive days that transformed Marcus's understanding of martial arts more than any championship victory ever had. Captain Ashworth proved to be an exceptional instructor, drawing from years of military experience and an intimate understanding of how highly trained animals and humans could work together in perfect harmony. Each session revealed new layers of awareness that Marcus had never developed, despite his extensive competitive background. On the second day, Captain Ashworth introduced Marcus to mounted combat exercises that had been adapted from historical cavalry training. Sitting astride Bucephalus for the first time, Marcus experienced a completely different perspective on balance, timing, and spatial awareness. Every technique he had mastered on solid ground required fundamental adjustments when performed from horseback, and Bucephalus seemed to understand and compensate for Marcus's learning curve with remarkable patience and intelligence. "Your martial arts training actually gives you significant advantages," Captain Ashworth observed as Marcus attempted to execute basic strikes while maintaining his seat. "Your body awareness and balance are exceptional, and your understanding of leverage and momentum translates well to mounted combat. However, you're still thinking like an individual fighter rather than part of a partnership." The insight highlighted something Marcus had never considered: that true combat effectiveness might require letting go of personal control in favor of collaborative awareness. The mounted exercises revealed weaknesses in Marcus's training that had never been exposed in tournament competition. His powerful techniques, when executed from horseback, often threw him off balance or worked against Bucephalus's natural movements. The horse would compensate automatically, but Marcus began to understand that his most devastating attacks were sometimes counterproductive in real-world situations where environmental factors and partnership dynamics mattered more than individual prowess. Captain Ashworth demonstrated advanced techniques that seemed to blur the line between human and horse capabilities. When working in perfect synchronization, with Bucephalus, the captain could execute maneuvers that appeared impossible for either human or horse individually. The partnership amplified both participants' abilities while covering each other's vulnerabilities in ways that Marcus found both inspiring and humbling to witness. Military cavalry units understood something that modern martial artists have largely forgotten, Captain Ashworth explained during a break in training. Individual excellence is important, but situational effectiveness depends on reading your environment, understanding your resources, and adapting your techniques to work with rather than against the circumstances you face. Marcus realized that his competitive mindset had trained him to dominate situations rather than flow with them. The third day brought the most challenging lesson yet. Captain Ashworth arranged for Marcus to work with Bucephalus independently, without direct instruction or guidance. The task was deceptively simple: spend 2 hours with the horse, practicing martial arts forms, while maintaining the peaceful partnership they had developed over the previous days. What Marcus discovered was that his muscle memory kept reverting to competitive patterns that triggered Bucephalus's defensive responses. Every time Marcus began executing his kata, with the intense focus and aggressive energy that had made him a champion, Bucephalus would subtly distance himself or position defensively. The horse wasn't rejecting Marcus personally, but rather responding to the combative energy that accompanied his most polished techniques. The feedback was immediate and undeniable. forcing Marcus to confront the difference between technical perfection and practical wisdom. The breakthrough came when Marcus attempted his grandfather's oldest kata, a slow, meditative form that emphasized internal energy cultivation over external power demonstration. As he moved through the ancient sequences with genuine mindfulness rather than competitive precision, Bucephalus began mirroring his movements in subtle ways. The horse would shift weight in harmony with Marcus's transitions, adjust his head, position to complement Marcus's arm movements, and maintain a relaxed alertness that suggested genuine partnership rather than mere tolerance. Captain Ashworth watched this development with obvious satisfaction. "You're discovering what your grandfather probably tried to teach you years ago," he commented as Marcus and Bucephalus moved together in natural synchronization. Martial arts at their highest level aren't about defeating opponents, they're about achieving harmony between internal awareness and external action. Bucephalus has been teaching you to access that level of practice because animals naturally operate from that kind of authentic presence. The realization hit Marcus with stunning clarity. His competitive achievements, while impressive, had actually moved him away from the deeper principles his grandfather had tried to instill. He had become so focused on winning tournaments and perfecting techniques for scoring points that he had lost touch with the spiritual and philosophical foundations that made martial arts truly transformative. Bucephalus had spent 3 days systematically stripping away his competitive conditioning to reveal the practitioner his grandfather had hoped he would become. As the afternoon session concluded, Marcus felt profound gratitude mixed with a sense of loss for the years he had spent pursuing external validation rather than internal development. Captain Ashworth and Bucephalus had given him something infinitely more valuable than another trophy or title. They had reconnected him with the authentic purpose of his lifelong practice. 6 months after his transformative encounter with Bucephalus and Captain Ashworth, Marcus returned to Edinburgh with a purpose that went far beyond tourism or professional conferences. The martial arts world had taken notice of dramatic changes in his teaching and competitive approach, though few understood the source of his evolution. His latest tournament performances had been marked by an almost supernatural ability to read opponents' intentions and respond with techniques that seemed effortless, yet devastatingly effective. Captain Ashworth greeted Marcus at the Royal Guard stables with the warm recognition reserved for someone who had undergone genuine transformation. Bucephalus approached without hesitation, displaying the calm confidence of a teacher pleased with his student's progress. The horse's greeting was subtle but unmistakable, a gentle nuzzle that conveyed both welcome and assessment of how much Marcus had retained from their earlier lessons. "Your reputation has evolved considerably," Captain Ashworth observed as they walked through the facility that had become sacred ground in Marcus's personal development. "I've heard reports from tournaments where opponents describe facing someone who seemed to anticipate their attacks before they had fully committed to them. That suggests you've been practicing the awareness principles we worked on here." The captain's tone carried genuine pride, the satisfaction of a teacher whose student had successfully applied difficult lessons. Marcus had indeed been revolutionizing his approach to martial arts, both as competitor and instructor. He had restructured his dojo's curriculum to emphasize mindfulness, energy awareness, and partnership-based training exercises that challenged students to work with rather than against their practice partners. The changes had initially confused longtime students accustomed to aggressive, technique-focused training, but the results spoke for themselves in improved performance and deeper understanding. "I've been sharing Bucephalus's lessons with my students," Marcus explained as he demonstrated some of the awareness exercises he had developed based on his experiences at the Royal Guard facility, teaching them that true martial arts mastery requires reading energy and intention, not just perfecting physical techniques. The transformation in their abilities has been remarkable, but more importantly, they're discovering the same sense of authentic practice that I rediscovered here. Captain Ashworth nodded approvingly as he watched Marcus work through a series of movements that perfectly balanced technical precision with mindful awareness. "Bucephalus taught you that combat effectiveness and spiritual development aren't opposing goals. They're different aspects of the same principle. When you operate from authentic presence rather than ego-driven competition, your techniques become both more powerful and more compassionate. The observation captured exactly what Marcus had been trying to articulate to fellow martial artists who questioned his new approach. The reunion session with Bucephalus demonstrated how completely Marcus had integrated the lessons from their original encounter. He could now work with the horse in perfect partnership, executing complex martial arts sequences while maintaining the peaceful awareness that kept Bucephalus relaxed and responsive. The contrast with his aggressive demonstration 6 months earlier was so complete that it seemed like watching a different person entirely. "I've been invited to conduct seminars at martial arts schools across Europe," Marcus shared as they concluded their practice session. "The demand is coming from instructors who've heard about the changes in my students' abilities and want to understand what we're doing differently. I always tell them the story of how a Royal Guards horse taught me more about authentic martial arts in 3 days than I had learned in 20 years of competitive training." Captain Ashworth smiled at this acknowledgement, clearly pleased that the lessons were spreading beyond Marcus's personal practice. Bucephalus represents principles that used to be central to all warrior traditions: the integration of spiritual awareness with practical skill, the importance of reading energy and intention, the value of partnership over domination. Modern martial arts often forget these foundations, but they're essential for anyone serious about understanding what combat training can really accomplish. As their visit concluded, Marcus experienced the same profound gratitude he had felt during his original transformation. Bucephalus had not only humbled his ego and exposed the limitations of his competitive mindset, but had reconnected him with the deeper purposes that made martial arts worth pursuing. The horse's lesson had been delivered with perfect precision, just enough force to get Marcus's attention, followed by patient instruction that revealed possibilities he had never imagined. Walking away from the Royal Guard facility, Marcus reflected on how a single moment of impulsive demonstration had led to the most important learning experience of his martial arts career. His encounter with Bucephalus had taught him that true mastery wasn't about perfecting techniques to defeat opponents, but about developing the kind of authentic presence that could transform any situation through awareness, wisdom, and appropriate response. The lesson continued to unfold in every aspect of his practice, reminding him daily that the greatest teachers often appear in unexpected forms, offering precisely the instruction needed to move beyond current limitations toward genuine understanding. Bucephalus had given him far more than a humbling experience. The remarkable horse had restored his connection to the timeless principles that made martial arts a path of personal transformation rather than merely a competitive sport.